Well, guys, it's not every day that I'm out here bringing you good news that was brought to me by a sitting Republican congressperson, but today is that day. Because not only is it starting to look like we could win the House in 2026, but it's also starting to look like even the Senate could now be in play as well. All because Tom Tillis recently announced that he will not be seeking re-election in the purple state of North Carolina. Which means if all of the stars align, we could take back the House and we could take back the Senate and stop Donald Trump in his tracks. And, you know, it's really quite ironic because in this MAGA Republican authoritarian party, dissent is not tolerated, and if you are not 100% in line with Donald Trump, then he is coming after you. And that is exactly what happened here. Tom Tillis opposed some parts of the big disastrous bill, and Donald Trump, in all of his stupidity, went on the attack, and Tom Tillis said, "Hold my beer, bitch. I'll just retire. I'll just go hang out with my family. That way I don't have to worry about the Mango Menace." And then he took to the Senate floor to give a scathing speech against Donald Trump and his disastrous bill. And that is what I want to talk about here. Here he is opening up that speech by basically calling out this budget bill for what it is: an unthoughtful and sloppy mess.
Why do I use that example? Because the Medicaid proposal in this bill bears no resemblance to that kind of discipline and due diligence. It has no insights into how these provider tax cuts are going to be absorbed without harming people on Medicare. And even worse, most of my colleagues do not even understand on either side of the aisle the interplay of state-directed payments and the devastating consequences of the funding flows that are going to be before us.
Yeah, he's exactly right. There is no due diligence that went into this bill. The Republicans did not put in the work to properly go through and methodically cut separate parts of the government. They didn't put any thought into how this was going to affect their constituents. No, they had one goal in mind. They wanted tax breaks for the wealthiest individuals in our country. And they were going to cut any program they could to get them there. It is going to be the largest transfer of wealth from the bottom to the top. And Tom Tillis is somebody that noticed. You're cutting millions upon millions of people off of their Medicaid. You're cutting millions of people off of their food assistance. And in North Carolina alone, he actually went out and commissioned studies by independent groups, by the Democrats, by the Republicans. And he looked at the data and said, this is going to be devastating for my state. That is what happened here, and he is absolutely correct. Now, obviously, his prescriptions as to how he would change the bill are going to be much, much different than mine, but he is rightly saying that this bill is a disaster. And he goes on to further say that, what am I supposed to tell the American people if I pass this bill?
But after 3 different attempts for them to discredit our estimates, the day before yesterday, they admitted that we were right, that between the state-directed payments and the cuts scheduled in this bill, there's a reduction of state-directed payments. And then there's the reduction of the provider tax. They can't find a hole in my estimate. So what they told me is that, yeah, it's rough, but North Carolina's used the system. They're going to have to make it work. All right. So what do I tell 663,000 people in 2 years or 3 years when President Trump breaks his promise by pushing them off of Medicaid because the funding's not there anymore, guys? I think in the White House, senators advising the president are not telling him that the effect of this bill is to break a promise. And you know the last time I saw a promise broken around health care, with respect to my friends on the other side of the aisle, it's when somebody said, if you like your health care, you can keep it. If you like your doctor, you can keep it. We found out that wasn't true. That made me the second Republican Speaker of the House since the Civil War, ladies and gentlemen, because we betrayed the promise to the American people.
So not only is he calling out Donald Trump saying that he is going to break his promise that he made to the American people, but he's also calling out the staff that is close to Donald Trump, who is lying to him about what this bill does. And Tom Tillis is absolutely correct here. They are going about cutting these different programs in some very asinine ways. They're saying, we're not really cutting Medicaid. We're just going to make the states pick up more of the tab, which is a de facto cut because states do not have the budget to fill those holes. Republicans know this. They know this is going to be devastating for millions upon millions of people, but they're going forward with it anyway. They're putting in these work requirements that are the most absurd work requirements that you could think of. They are going to be kicking people off of the program because now there's all of this other red tape, all of this other bureaucracy. You're going to kick people who actually are entitled and belong on the program, and because they can't make it through these other hurdles, you're going to kick them off as well. This has been studied. Republicans should know this, but they are moving forward anyway because all they care about is tax cuts to their wealthy buddies. Now, Tom Tillis goes on to say in this speech that he likes the work requirements and a few other provisions that I absolutely cannot stand. I think he's absolutely wrong here. But he is calling out Donald Trump and his team. He's calling out this bill for what it will actually do, and that is going to be devastate millions upon millions of people throughout the country, especially those in the state of North Carolina. He is not wrong there. He goes on to say the last time that this happened, Republicans got crushed electorally.
2 years later, 3 years later, it actually made me a U.S. Senator because in 2010, it had just been proposed. And just anticipation of what was going to happen was enough to have a sea change election that swept Republicans into the majority for the second time in 100 years. Now, Republicans are about to make a mistake on health care and betraying a promise. It is inescapable that this bill in its current form will betray the very promise that Donald J. Trump made in the Oval Office or in the cabinet room when I was there with finance, where he said, we can go after waste, fraud, and abuse on any programs. Now, those amateurs that are advising him, not Dr. Oz, I'm talking about White House healthcare experts, refuse to tell him that those instructions that were to eliminate waste, fraud, and abuse all of a sudden eliminates a government program that's called the provider tax.
He's not wrong here. Donald Trump, over and over and over and over again, said he wasn't going to cut your Medicaid, he wasn't going to cut your Medicare. I don't know if he made a promise on food stamps or not, but he probably did because that's just what Donald Trump does. But what this bill does is exactly that. They're trying to play all these word games. They're trying to twist people up in knots and get them all confused, trying to say, oh, we're just getting rid of the waste, fraud, and abuse, guys. We're just making sure that all these able-bodied young men, they're not on the program. Even though we've looked at this data before. Most people on Medicaid are already working full or part-time. And the rest of the people who aren't, they're in college, they're taking care of their parents or their children or their disabled children. Maybe they're disabled themselves. There's very good reasons as to why people are on Medicaid and they wouldn't be working. And so they're coming up with all these crazy stories, all these crazy excuses to try to pull one over on the American people. It is going to be devastating for the lowest income families in our population. It is going to be devastating for people who rely on this program to at least try to remain healthy. Also, these assholes can give more tax breaks to the wealthiest among us. Like I said, it is going to be the largest transfer of wealth between the lowest earners to the wealthiest among us. This bill is corrupt. It is immoral. It is disgusting. And there are just a few Republicans who can actually stand up and say, this is not good. Republicans made this promise before. We've seen this, right? When they were trying to repeal the ACA. They got crushed in the midterms. And I'm hoping that we're going to see the same effect here. I'm a bit worried that Donald Trump has some nefarious plan, or his administration has some nefarious plan to make sure that elections aren't going off without a hitch. I'm a little bit nervous there. But if we take a look at the polling of this bill, we take a look at the big disastrous bill and how it stacks up for the American people, it is overwhelmingly unpopular. We're talking about 30 points underwater. So Democrats need to continue to message on this. We need to point out characters like Tom Tillis here, who is coming out and speaking out against this bill. We need to cut ads using his words alone. We need to help the American people understand that this bill will be devastating for our country. It is the same Republican pipe dreams that they have been speaking about for years, that they have been trying to push for years, and it's going to hurt the American people. So Tom Tillis goes on to say, I'm withholding my vote on this bill, at least for now.
But, Mr. President, we owe it to the states to do the work to understand how these proposals affect them. How hard is that? I did it. How hard is it? How hard is it to sit down and ask the Medicaid office, ask the legislative staff, ask the Independent Hospital Association what the impact is? If there's no negative impact, what's wrong with daylight? What's wrong with actually understanding what this bill does? Mr. President, I know what it does because I spent a career implementing complex systems, and then I had the privilege of being Speaker of the House, and I implemented them in a government setting. And since I've been here, I've focused on bills and watched their implementation from the cradle until they're fully implemented. Mr. President, we owe it to the American people, and I owe it to the people of North Carolina to withhold my affirmative vote until it's demonstrated to me that we've done our homework. We're going to make sure that we fulfill the promise, and then I can feel good about a bill that I'm willing to vote for. But until that time, I will be withholding my vote.
He's exactly right. They should be doing their due diligence. They should be looking at how this bill is going to impact the American people. It doesn't seem like much of that due diligence was done at all. They're even trying to ignore the CBO, which is the Congressional Budget Office, who are projecting that anywhere between 8 and 15 million people are going to be thrown off their Medicaid. We've seen other private organizations do their own form of analysis. They say it's going to throw millions of people off of their Medicaid. We've seen other financial institutions doing their analysis. They say it's going to be absolutely devastating for a whole bunch of people in our country. But the Republicans, they do not even want to acknowledge any of that. And instead, they're relying on tricking the American people. They are hoping that they can sell you a story that just isn't true. They're trying to say that waste, fraud, and abuse is all that we're getting rid of. We're going to make sure that these able-bodied young males who are smoking weed on mom's couch, they're not eligible. It's all just a load of shit. So yes, this bill is going to be a disaster for my country. Tom Tillis is somebody who recognizes that, and because he is not willing to fall in line in this authoritarian cult, and because maybe he was trying a little bit more strategy than Donald Trump is capable of thinking of, he decided, I'm not dealing with this anymore. I'm out of here. I'm not going to run for re-election. And that puts Democrats in a much better spot to possibly be able to take over the Senate in the 2026 midterms. That is excellent, excellent news. We might go into a little bit more detail about what the map might look like and the implications of Tom Tillis not seeking re-election and who the possible candidates might be in North Carolina. But this is good and welcome news for the Democratic Party. They've got to start putting in the work now. They've got good people on the ground in North Carolina. Hopefully they are on the ground already. They are ready to put somebody forward, get somebody like Roy Cooper, I believe, is planning on running. This is really good news. We need to take advantage of it. We need to cut ads using Tom Tillis' words from this Senate speech here and let the American people know that he was only looking out for his constituents, albeit in a way different way than I would be. He still agrees with much of the crap that is in this bill, But he is calling Donald Trump out. He is withholding his vote from this bill for now because, again, it is going to be a disaster for the American people. So I will leave it there for now, guys. If you guys got anything out of this video, please do remember to smash that like button and subscribe. Maybe share with a friend or two. I very much appreciate that. We are trying to build something here on the left that adequately pushes back against the right-wing media ecosystem that just launders all of this authoritarian nonsense for Donald Trump and his administration day in and day out. So if you do like what I do here, please do remember to smash that subscribe button. Of course, that is free. And if you guys want to see how the Supreme Court basically opened up the floodgates for Donald Trump to continue in his lawlessness by removing the ability for district courts to impose nationwide injunctions, go ahead and watch that video on the screen now. Otherwise, I'll see you guys on the next one.